10 Basic Mistakes Naruto Keeps Making. Like the best anime protagonists, Naruto is flawed and doesn't always make the right choices, but he repeats some of his mistakes a bit too often. The Naruto story follows the adventures of its title protagonist as he continues to aspire to become Hokage. Like any character, the hero has flaws and makes mistakes that define his personality and render him a believably dynamic personality, additionally serving to expand the plot in many instances. However, some of his errors have been made more than once, others are constant flaws that he never seems to learn from in spite of the results his actions garner. Through acknowledging Uzumaki's most frequent blunders, fans can better appreciate the imperfections that make him engaging and human. 10. He pursued Sakura's unreciprocated love. At the beginning of the series, Naruto was hopelessly infatuated with Sakura. This was at least partially responsible for his intense rivalry with Sasuke, as he had hoped to impress her. Regardless of how ardently he tried, she never even remotely alluded to returning interest in him. His lust was a frequent mistake throughout the first half of the series. Ironically, he would be the one rejecting her in Shippuden after she had offered herself to him, hoping that by manipulating his feelings, she could prolong Sasuke's life. 9. He ignored his son in favor of Hokage work. Eventually, Naruto would achieve his dream to become Hokage. However, he would discover that the office wasn't as romanticized as the heroes on Konoha's mountainside may have implied. Though he was indeed the most capable protector of his village, he was also buried under paperwork and trivialities. Unfortunately, he chose to prioritize it over Boruto, compelling his son to find increasingly clever and subtle ways to earn his attention and impress him. In this regard, the young Uzumaki was much like Naruto himself at the beginning of the series. 8. He recklessly attacks enemies without considering their abilities. Naruto's aggressive nature may be an excellent asset since it gives him the courage to take immediate and decisive action. But it is also a tremendous liability when harnessed improperly. The most clear example of this comes from his battle against Obito in the first alongside Kakashi and many of his Konoha allies. Despite having no knowledge of the villain's Kamui, he continued to rush him with reckless abandon. Should the Akatsuki leader have chosen to retaliate in this instance, it might have borne fatal consequences for the Jinchuriki. 7. He failed to pick up on Hinata's affection for him. Hinata was interested in Naruto since the beginning of the series, having watched him from afar even during his days as a rapscallion. She frequently attempted to make her feelings known but was often too bashful to express herself properly. Unfortunately, Naruto was completely oblivious to these feelings throughout the entire first act and much of Shippuden. This is profoundly egregious considering that she was only able to resist Neji for as long as she had by following his example. It was a plaintive demonstration of the hero's incompetence at handling intimate relationships. 6. Attempting to redeem villains that don't deserve it. Naruto has made a frequent effort to redeem villains who don't deserve it, with his success only founded on narrative convenience and plot armor. The most egregious evidence of this comes through Orochimaru's unprecedented and partial absolution after his utility in the Fourth Ninja War. Further demonstrations are observed through his battles against Obito and Nagato. Though his attempts to reach out to the antagonists would bear fruit, his gullibility could have portended disastrous consequences, ones that nearly claimed his life. 5. Letting his mentors get away with everything. Jiraiya and Kakashi were both the former mentors of Naruto. However, each of them were irresponsible in their own right. The former expected Naruto to starve for what he knew to be an impossible challenge and was grossly unprofessional in his tutelage as seen through his 1,000 Years of Death technique. The latter was a womanizer who would often leave Naruto to his own devices in order to pursue his hedonism. It almost got his student killed after the Akatsuki infiltrated the Leaf and cornered him at his hotel. 4. Claiming he can't be Hokage unless he retrieves Sasuke. Naruto's reasoning for returning Sasuke was bizarre, to say the least. He stated that he could not become Hokage if he couldn't even save his friend. Using that rhetoric to justify the suffering that his former ally would put him through. This was in spite of the fact that Sasuke was already an international fugitive who attempted to kill everyone on his old team including Naruto himself and made a bid at global domination by enslaving ancient beings. He only changed his ambitions after the hero had literally disarmed. 3. Leaving his Sage Mode clones unprotected. Sage Mode requires perfect stillness of one's hands in order to use properly. Considering that its chakra is primarily intended for combat purposes. Naruto prefers to create shadow clones by which to generate his strength for him. However, the clones themselves are completely vulnerable to attack. This was demonstrated both through Naruto's battle against Sasuke and his fight with Pain. In the instance of the latter, the Toads of Mtmaiboku would have been completely unprepared for any Akatsuki member who might have attacked, such as Konan, who was otherwise absent for the assault on Konoha. 2. Annoying everyone by shouting his dreams constantly. Naruto's most common behavior is of his compulsion to shout his dreams without solicitation. This often comes across as abrasive and annoying. Especially in the earlier acts of the series where his ambitions were mostly implausible. Further, it was behavior that literally no other character had practiced. Sasuke would not talk about his vengeance unless asked. Sakura would only share her insecurities and they became pertinent, and Kakashi allowed his actions to speak for him. Considering that his aims have never changed since he was introduced. Naruto's proclivity for reiterating himself is grating and redundant. 1. He attempts to fight opponents much stronger than himself. Naruto often toes the line between courage and foolishness. During the Akatsuki's infiltration of the village when Jiraiya was not able to reach him. He did not attempt to run from Kisame or Itachi. Instead, he prepared to fight two fully fledged villains without any knowledge of their ability and after witnessing them destroy Sasuke in seconds. This recklessness was repeated again during Momoshiki's attack, where he did not make a tactical retreat in spite of the Otsutsuki's clearly superior jutsu. If he had, he would have been better prepared to thwart him later alongside Sasuke.